I think the most basic foundational things to share about that, one is relative to psychotherapeutic therapy and plant medicine ceremonies. The first and most fundamental thing is that music bypasses the intellect. That's why it's so potent and beautiful. It's a language that we understand. It's a language of the heart, obviously. Um, and it triggers deep culturally embedded everything from nostalgia to trauma, which is why it's so valuable. You know, I tend to think in these terms of most of the things that people are coming to therapists or to plant medicines to heal are things that are in the subconscious, meaning in this context, things that for whatever reasons have been intentionally buried and suppressed. And we don't have through regular conversation or just recall access to these things, but music does, right? Yeah, certain melodies, drumming, of course, um, yeah, rhythm and cadence, yeah, all of those things can like trigger and unlock parts of our psyche and emotions and so forth that we just don't normally have access to. And they put us in this beautiful open space where everything related to that thing can actually surface and be seen or be exposed and, experienced. So, yeah, and I'm giving very layman's terms about this because I've actually studied the whole thing, but I'm really speaking more from the direct experience, kind of anecdotally from being in ceremony. That I sing a song like Grateful in Ceremony, and, it's just the importance of being grateful, but just sung in a way that is never like a teaching per se. It's just the value of waking up in the morning and hearing birds singing and being grateful that you've loved and lived it all. It's really rare that that song is not played or sung in ceremony that half the room doesn't start crying, right? Um, yeah, because it triggers the most obvious things that you just don't have access to. And it's like, example, one of the things I share all the time is that the answer to most of our so-called problems is actually just gratitude, right? So if you just hear that, like somebody's just listening to me say it now, it's like, yeah, cool. Yeah, that's true. That's very different. It's a visceral and somatic experience when you hear it sung to you in ceremony and you actually realize that the answer to whatever it is you came to the ceremony for is actually just gratitude for what you have already, right? Or living in a state of gratitude and the value of it. So I think that's why the music is so key. And again, its ability to kind of bypass the intellect and communicate to different parts of us. And in my case, I'm glad you brought up, like gospel, blues, a lot of indigenous music, a lot of Americana. This is music that was by and large born from pain and suffering. That's where it's coming from, right? So when you hear that, or anything that kind of like leans into that direction, same thing happens. It triggers those things inside of us. We all carry, we now know, scientifically that we're carrying the traumas of our ancestors. To what degree, we don't know. But the science seems to be revealing in research more and more every year. I just read an article yesterday, um, kind of affirming something that we actually heard 20 years ago, which is each of us carries in our DNA the traumas that your ancestors experienced. And in addition to that, just the immediate traumas, let's say like the baggage that you got from your abusive father or neglected mother, whatever the thing is, nothing is more effective at triggering those things and offering like a container to hold them and process them or grieve through them than music does. You know? Yeah, so I've often said to people that are like wanting to train to facilitate, you know, this part of our conversation is the thing that I share with them. I say, when you really understand the power of music and the role that it plays with human beings in general, but particularly in that space, you're going to be much more effective at what you're doing, right? There's not a lot of I think a lot of young people go to Peru, wherever they experience ayahuasca, they study with a particular teacher, and they have this idea that what they're learning is like a lot of magical shamanic hocus pocus, right? And technologies and tools. And yes, your teacher's responsibility is to teach you those things. But I said, however, in ceremony, your main job is to hold the space so that the medicine and the music can do its job, basically. And those tools come into play when they're needed, not as something that's necessary for the transformation process to take place. But if you're in a ceremony and you're having a difficult time, or someone else in the room is, you definitely want a facilitator that has experience and has trained and understands all the ins and outs and the technologies. We like to refer to them as technologies, and the wisdom that their teachers have taught them. But in general, that's not what's happening. In general, it's like strong orientation, teach people how to navigate the experience, depending on the kind of session it is, choosing appropriate music for it, and then what we call holding a really tight container, like the space that the ceremony can unfold in, that it's safe, that the crew that you're working with has experience, they know what they're doing, and people feel really safe and comfortable, to kind of dive in and go deep. You can pretty much rely on the music in concert with the medicine to do the job. Yeah.